There's a place the locals won't speak of after sundown, a hill where the air turns bitter, and even the animals keep their distance. They call it Dead Man's Hill, and for good reason. Generations have whispered of the curses etched into the soil, of shadows that move when nothing else does, and of the chilling screams that drift through the trees when the wind dies. But what if someone dared to uncover its secrets? In this bone-chilling horror saga, The Curse of Dead Man's Hill, a chilling exploration, we follow a group of curious souls who set out to investigate the hill's terrifying past. What they discover is far beyond what any of them could have imagined, a haunting chain of events that will leave you breathless, paranoid, and hungry for answers. Hallucinations, fear, blood, shadows that know your name. The curse is real, and it's waiting. But here's the real question. If you heard your name whispered in the dark by a voice you've never known, would you follow it? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this terrifying tale with your fellow horror lovers. You won't want to miss what's coming. Now, let the darkness begin. The gravel crunched under the tires of the black 4x4 as it crawled up the lonely dirt path, winding through trees that bent unnaturally over the road, like mourners at a funeral. Dusk painted the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange, but the forest canopy swallowed most of it whole, casting the trail into a premature twilight. Inside the vehicle, the air buzzed with nervous anticipation, broken only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional nervous chuckle. "You guys sure this is the right way?" asked Mason, the self-appointed leader of the group and the one holding the map. An old stained thing he'd bought from a collector online. His voice cracked with a mix of confidence and fear. Sitting beside him, Laura scanned her phone. GPS died about 2 miles back. Zero signal. This is where it says Dead Man's Hill starts. Or ends, depending on how lucky you are. In the back seat, Deshaun and Ivy sat unusually quiet. Deshaun stared out the window, his fingers twitching on his lap, eyes locked on something in the woods. Ivy scrolled through photos on her camera, the lens still warm from their last stop. She wasn't interested in legends. She wanted evidence. "Guys," Deshaun said slowly, "there was something out there, by that crooked tree. It was standing there, watching us." Laura rolled her eyes. "It's always a shadow, or a shape. Can we at least set up camp before the spooky stories start?" But Mason had gone pale. "The tree with the hook-shaped branch?" "Yeah, why?" Deshaun's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's in the stories," Mason muttered. "The hook tree. The legend says anyone who sees it marks the beginning of their hallucinations, right before the hill tries to claim them." The car went silent. They reached a clearing surrounded by gnarled trees and oppressive quiet. The sun dipped below the horizon like it couldn't escape fast enough. The group unloaded their gear: tents, lanterns, infrared cameras, EMF readers, and a voice recorder. Mason was documenting everything. Ivy, ever skeptical but intrigued, checked the battery levels on her equipment. It wasn't long before the forest began to change. At first it was small things, whispers just beyond the range of hearing, cold spots in the air, even though the night was warm, and the overwhelming feeling that they were being watched. Then the air shifted. Deshaun stumbled backward, clutching his head. "Did anyone else hear that?" he gasped. "Hear what?" Ivy asked, rushing to his side. "A voice. A woman's voice. She said, 'He's watching. Run before the ground drinks you.'" His breathing was erratic, eyes wide and unfocused. They exchanged looks. Mason activated the voice recorder and swept it through the air. "Are there any spirits here with us?" he asked, his voice steady but low. "Is this Dead Man's Hill? If you can hear me, give us a sign." Static. Then a high-pitched giggle. Not human. Ivy nearly dropped her camera. "Please tell me someone else heard that." "We need to get this recorded," Mason said, already scanning through the playback. The giggle repeated, louder, closer. Suddenly the trees groaned like old wood under pressure. Ivy's camera flickered violently, then died. Lara swore, fumbling with her lantern, but it too blinked out. Only Deshaun's headlamp remained, casting jagged beams of light across the trees. That's when they saw her. A girl no more than 10 stood between the oaks. Her dress was soaked in mud, her face pale and wrong. Not because of what was there, but what wasn't. She had no eyes, just smooth, scarred skin where they should have been. She raised a hand slowly and pointed at Deshaun. He screamed and dropped to his knees, clawing at his own face. Get her away from me! She's inside my head! Mason pulled him back, trying to snap him out of it. There's nothing there, he shouted. Deshaun, focus! But the girl didn't move, and Ivy could still see her, even as Lara swore there was nothing there. The hallucinations had started. They brought Deshaun into the tent, wrapped him in a blanket. His eyes darted to corners no one else could see. He whispered things under his breath, words in an ancient tongue, not his own. He's changed, Ivy said, voice low. He's not just scared. It's like something's leaking into him. That night, none of them slept. Branches scraped across the tents like nails. Shadows moved without sources. The temperature dropped by 20 degrees. The voice recorder played back conversations they hadn't had, voices that didn't belong to them. At 3:07 a.m., Ivy stepped outside for air. That's when she saw them. Figures, dozens of them, hanging from invisible nooses in the air. Their bodies swayed in silence. One turned its head, slowly, and smiled. Its face was Deshaun's. She ran back into the tent, heart pounding, skin crawling with cold sweat. We're not alone out there, she whispered. Lara lit another lantern, her hands trembling. We were never alone. Then they heard it, the sound of heavy footsteps circling the tents. Not animal, not human. Something in between, something wrong. The wind picked up, but it didn't come from above. It came from the ground, rising like breath from a rotting mouth. The hill was waking up. Mason's flashlight shook in his grip as he crawled out of the tent. The footsteps had stopped, just like that, replaced by a silence so complete it felt deafening. Every breath he took sounded like a scream. The hairs on the back of his neck bristled as he slowly scanned the perimeter. Nothing. Then everything at once. All at once, the air grew thick, heavier, like trying to breathe underwater. Ivy clambered out behind him, still gripping her dead camera like a shield. Do you smell that? She asked, her voice rasping. He nodded. It was unmistakable. Rot, earth, copper, blood. Lara followed, her lantern casting jittery light across the trees. Deshaun's asleep, she said. Or something close to it. He's not responsive. Mason crouched and pressed his hand to the earth. It felt warm, throbbing. Then it pulsed, like a heartbeat. I don't think we're on the hill, he said slowly. I think we're in it. Suddenly, a loud, sharp crack echoed through the forest, followed by a horrible dragging sound. Ivy spun on her heels and caught a flicker of movement. A figure, slouched, too tall, its limbs hung like tangled ropes, fingers scraping the ground. It didn't walk so much as slid forward. They froze. It stopped 20 feet away, half hidden by trees. They could hear it breathing. Deep, wet, shuddering breaths like wind through a corpse's chest. Mason whispered, "Don't move. Don't even blink." But Ivy did, and it moved. It vanished from its spot and reappeared 10 feet closer, head twitching unnaturally. Inside! Now! Mason shouted, and they scattered. Ivy ran for the tent. Lara tripped over a log, and Mason grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet just as the figure lunged from the shadows. It wasn't human. Its body was stretched, skinless in patches, eyes sunken like collapsed tunnels. Its mouth opened in a soundless scream, revealing a dark, endless void instead of a throat. The moment they zipped the tent closed, a sound like wind through broken glass screamed around them, followed by furious pounding against the canvas. Ivy held the flap shut with both hands, sobbing silently. And then, nothing. Just silence again. It didn't feel like a reprieve. It felt like they'd just failed some kind of test. Inside the other tent, Deshaun sat upright. His eyes were wide open now, but still unseeing. He was whispering, repeating something over and over. Mori venit in silentio. Mori venit in silentio. What is that? Lara asked, creeping over. It's Latin, Mason muttered. It means death comes in silence. Suddenly, Deshaun stopped whispering. He turned his head slowly, his eyes locked on Mason, even though they were unfocused. Then in a voice not his own, he said, "You shouldn't have come here." The temperature in the tent plummeted. Everyone could see their breath. Ivy's hands trembled as she reached for the voice recorder and hit record. Deshaun's mouth contorted into a grotesque grin. The hill remembers the blood. The hill remembers the screams. It remembers her. Mason stepped forward cautiously. "Who's her?" Deshaun's head twitched. "The girl. The eyeless one. She was the first. She opened the way. The hill fed on her sorrow. And now it needs more." Laura backed into the corner. "We're going to die out here." "No," Ivy said suddenly. "Number, we're going to document this. Get it on tape. We're not dying for nothing." As the night dragged on, the boundaries between dream and reality began to blur. Ivy began seeing faces in the tent fabric, faces that screamed silently and vanished when touched. Mason heard his mother's voice whispering to him from the trees, except she'd been dead for 5 years. Lara smelled smoke and ash and found herself covered in soot, though no fire had ever touched the camp. They were losing their minds. At dawn, the forest lit with a sickly gray light. Ivy stepped out first. "We need to move. We need to get higher up. Maybe signal someone." They packed quickly, leaving Deshaun semi-conscious and tied loosely in a makeshift harness Mason had rigged from ropes and blankets. The trail ahead led uphill through tight, twisting paths where trees grew impossibly close together, their bark marked with strange carvings, symbols no one recognized. Hours passed. The forest didn't end. It felt like walking in circles, even though the compass kept pointing forward. Ivy climbed a rock to try to get her bearings, but what she saw turned her blood cold. The tents, still there, below them. They hadn't moved at all. Laura broke down, sobbing into her hands. "We've been walking for hours and we're still here." The wind picked up again, whispering, "Turn back, turn back." "No," Mason growled. "We go deeper. We face this thing, this curse or ghost or whatever it is. We end it." They pressed forward. Eventually they found something, a clearing with stone markers, crude, weathered gravestones, each marked with a single name. Some were fresh. One read, Deshaun Turner, 2025. Another, Ivy Baker, 2025. They kept reading. Mason, Laura, all listed, all with today's date. "What kind of sick joke is this?" Ivy hissed, backing away. Then the wind stopped. Everything went still. Deshaun began to laugh. Not his laugh. A deep, guttural sound that echoed across the stones. "She's here." And from behind one of the graves, the girl appeared again. Only this time she wasn't alone. A dozen others emerged from the trees. Children, twisted, broken, some headless, some missing limbs. One dragged her own spine behind her like a leash. The group backed up slowly, hearts pounding. Ivy turned to Mason. "What now?" He didn't answer, because he was staring at a stone with a date that hadn't been carved yet. It was still being etched slowly, invisibly, right before his eyes. It read, April 5th, 2025. Time of death, unknown. Laura's scream pierced the silence like a blade, echoing across the clearing as the final line carved itself into the headstone bearing her name. Cause of death remains unrecovered. "Run!" Ivy shouted, grabbing Laura's arm as the malformed children closed in, their movements twitchy, unnatural, like puppets on broken strings. Mason dragged Deshaun, who had gone limp again, whispering that same cursed phrase over and over. Mori venit in silentio. Mori venit in silentio. The group tore through the undergrowth, thorns ripping at their legs and arms, tree branches clawing at their hair and clothes like the forest itself wanted to keep them. The air felt thicker, and every step seemed to take more effort than the last, as though time and space were melting together, fighting their escape. Behind them, laughter, high-pitched, innocent, cruel. "We need to get to high ground," Mason shouted between gasps. "Legend said something about the burial mound. Maybe—" "I don't care about legends anymore," Laura snapped. tears streaking down her dirt-covered face. "I want out!" A scream cut her off. Sharp, desperate. Deshaun was gone. One moment, Mason was dragging him. The next, the ropes were empty. "I didn't let go!" Mason shouted. "I didn't! He was right here!" They skidded to a stop. Ivy looked back. There, half hidden in the trees, Deshaun stood, silent, his eyes glowing faintly red, mouth hanging open as though screaming. But no sound came, and behind him, her, the eyeless girl, now closer than ever. Her skin had cracked like old porcelain, revealing patches of dark, worm-infested rot beneath. She raised her hand and pressed it against Deshaun's chest. He crumbled, not fell, crumbled, like his body had turned to ash. Ivy covered her mouth, stifling a scream as the ash drifted upward, caught by the wind, spiraling into the canopy like smoke from a funeral pyre. Laura collapsed to her knees. "He's gone," she whispered. "No," Mason muttered. "No, no, no. We are not dying here." He pulled both girls up by their arms and pushed forward, further into the woods. The trees changed again. They grew thicker, the trunks wide as vans, roots like claws. The air smelled of burnt flesh and sulfur. Birds no longer sang. No insects chirped. Nothing alive dared make a sound. They stumbled into another clearing. But this one was wrong. It was a circle of scorched earth, bones piled in a twisted pattern around a single massive stone slab. Carvings ran along the rock's edges. Sigils, spirals, and claw-like scratches. Ivy stepped closer and snapped a photo with her backup camera. The photo showed something they couldn't see with the naked eye. A man, or what had once been a man. Tall, skeletal, a crown of bone fused to his skull, his mouth filled with teeth like needles. In his arms, he held the eyeless girl, cradling her like a doll. "Who is she?" Ivy whispered. Mason's voice cracked. "According to the stories, the girl was sacrificed here, over a century ago. Some kind of cult. They believed the hill could give them eternal life, but only if they gave it innocent blood first." Lara shuddered. "They summoned that thing. The man. The one with the crown." "The dead man," Mason whispered. "He wasn't always dead, but the hill made him something else." Suddenly, a bone snapped behind them. They turned. A man stepped into the circle. He wore modern hiking gear, but his face wasn't right. His features were stretched too wide, eyes too deep, skin mottled and waxy. "I've been watching you," he said, voice low and hoarse. "You're close now, so close to the truth." "Who are you?" Ivy demanded, raising the camera like a weapon. "A survivor," he answered, "or what's left of one. I came here in '97. We were 5. Now I'm 1. I've been walking the hill for years. You never leave. You only go deeper." Mason stepped forward cautiously. "You know how to stop this?" The man's face twitched. "Stop it? Number, you can't stop it. You can only feed it, or become part of it." From beneath his jacket, he pulled something wrapped in cloth. He tossed it at their feet. It unrolled, revealing a necklace. On it hung 3 teeth and a human finger bone. Ivy backed away. "What the hell is that?" "A token," the man said. "A gift from her, so she knows you've chosen to obey." "We're not choosing anything," Mason snapped. The man grinned, a sickening stretch of skin and yellowed teeth. "You already did, when you stepped on the hill." With that, he turned and walked straight into a tree. Not around it. Into it. His body dissolved into bark. His final smile burned into their memories. "We need to get out of here," Lara stammered, panicking again. "Before we end up like him." "No," Mason said, looking down at the stone altar. "We need to know more. There's something this hill wants us to see." He brushed the ash off the stone slab and uncovered words carved into the surface. "The roots remember. Blood must water them." Suddenly, Ivy cried out. Her arm had started bleeding. 3 deep scratches across her skin, as if invisible claws had torn through her flesh. "I didn't touch anything," she screamed. Blood dripped onto the slab. The stone hissed. The carvings lit up. From the trees, the voices began again. Not whispers. Screams. Mothers calling for their children. Children screaming for mercy. Men begging for their lives. The air turned thick with sorrow, pain, and rage. The ground began to quake. "I think we woke it up," Mason said. "No," Ivy said, pale as death. "We fed it." The clearing trembled beneath their feet. The once still trees began to sway violently, though there was no wind. The stone slab pulsed with a sickening red glow, like a heartbeat reverberating through the ground. Ivy stumbled back, clutching her wounded arm, eyes locked on the glowing carvings. "They're moving," she whispered. "The symbols are changing." Indeed, the sigils on the altar seemed to shift of their own accord, curling and twisting, transforming into grotesque images. Open mouths, hollow eyes, disjointed limbs. Mason reached for Ivy's hand, but she flinched away. The wound on her arm was widening, not bleeding, but opening, the skin peeling like something trying to crawl out from beneath. "We need to go. Now," Lara said, voice cracking as she stared at Ivy's injury. "That's not just a scratch. That's something living." Ivy gritted her teeth, trying to stay upright. Her pupils dilated unevenly, and her breath came in short, sharp bursts. "It's whispering to me. The hill. It wants more blood. It's hungry." Mason slung her arm over his shoulder. "We'll get you help. Just hold on." But as they turned from the altar, a voice boomed through the trees. Not from one direction, but from everywhere. "You heard the song. You breathed the dust. You drank from the well of silence. Now you are part of it." They ran. Branches lashed at their faces. Roots lifted from the ground to trip them. The very forest turned hostile, rejecting their presence like an immune system attacking a virus. As they pushed through a thicket, Lara screamed and disappeared into the earth. "Lara!" Mason shouted. He and Ivy stopped short, reaching the edge of a massive sinkhole that had opened beneath her. The ground cracked wider, and they could see Lara clinging to a root, barely holding on. Below, black ooze churned, writhing with skeletal hands reaching from the depths. "Don't let go," Ivy shouted, but Lara's hands were slick with blood and mud. "I can't hold it," Lara sobbed. "Something's pulling me." Mason dropped to his stomach and reached for her. Just as their fingers brushed, something yanked Lara downward, hard. Her scream faded into the void as the hole snapped shut, the ground resealing like flesh after a wound. Ivy collapsed, shaking uncontrollably. "She's gone. She's gone." Mason stared at the spot where Lara vanished, his mind numb. We need to find shelter." They stumbled onward, deeper into the woods, following what looked like a narrow path marked by strange totems. Carved skulls, bones bound by sinew, and feathers soaked in dark stains. Every few steps they passed more. A child's shoe nailed to a tree, a broken doll with teeth filed to points, animal carcasses tied in geometric patterns. "This is ritual," Ivy murmured, her voice distant. "They worshipped it. The hill. The thing beneath." As night fell again, the cold returned, deeper this time. Not just physical, it was spiritual. It sank into their bones, into their thoughts, into their dreams. They found a structure half buried in vines and moss, a crumbling stone chapel, windowless and leaning at a sickening angle. Inside, the walls were covered in black mold and faded murals, depicting human sacrifices, flames, and a towering shadow figure crowned in bone. Mason found a journal near the altar, brittle with age. He flipped it open with care, scanning the scrawled entries. "We feed it to be spared. She weeps each night, and so do we. No longer sure if we die or become part of the song." One entry was signed, A. Whitlock, 1872. "The Whitlock family," Mason breathed. "They were the original settlers near the hill, the ones who vanished, all of them." Ivy sat against the wall, her breathing shallow. Her veins had begun to darken, spider-webbing out from the wound. She looked up at Mason, eyes glassy. "It's inside me." He dropped beside her. "Number, don't say that." "I can hear them. The children. Deshawn, Lara. They're not gone, not really. They're part of the hill now. And I'm next." "No," Mason said, gripping her shoulders. "We're getting out. I'll carry you if I have to." But Ivy only smiled, a haunted, tired smile. You think we ever left the clearing? He froze. What are you talking about? Ivy pointed at the wall, at a mural. It showed three figures entering the woods. A man, two women. One of the women was bleeding. One was sinking into the ground. The man stood alone before a red stone altar. It was them. Exactly them. Mason recoiled. That's not possible. The mural was unfinished. Only the third figure's face remained unpainted. Just a blank silhouette. Mason turned to ask Ivy something, but she was gone. Not just unconscious, gone. Her backpack, her jacket, her voice recorder. All gone, like she'd never been there. The chapel door slammed shut. A single candle lit itself on the altar. Mason was alone. The wind began to howl again, rising in a shrieking crescendo that mimicked screams of agony. Shadows twisted along the chapel walls, dancing in impossible patterns. The ceiling cracked above him, bits of stone and mold raining down. Then, silence. Complete. Crushing. Mason slowly turned to the altar. A figure stood behind it, the eyeless girl. This time she was no longer weeping. Her face had changed. Her mouth was sewn shut with rusted wire, her hands outstretched as if offering something. In her palms were three small stones, one red, one black, one white, each engraved with a single name, Ivy, Lara, Deshawn. Mason stared in horror. There was space for a fourth, and it was blank. The girl tilted her head, her empty socket staring straight through him. From outside, the forest chanted in broken, mangled voices. Mori venet in silencio. Mori venet in silencio. Mason backed away from the altar, the stones in the girl's outstretched hands pulsing with a sickly glow. Each beat of light seemed to sync with the pounding in his skull, echoing Ivy's final words. You think we ever left the clearing? His breath caught as he turned. The chapel was no longer as he'd seen it. The stone walls had melted into roots, slick and pulsing, weaving together like tendons in a muscle. The pews were gone, replaced with rows of kneeling figures, unmoving, faceless, cloaked in tattered cloth that writhed of its own accord. From somewhere beneath his feet, a steady drip echoed upward, like blood hitting water. The eyeless girl moved closer, her sewn mouth split open with a sickening rip, threads snapping one strand at a time. You are chosen, she whispered, but her voice came not from her mouth. It seeped from the walls, the floor, from Mason's own chest. You woke the hill. Now you must feed it. No, Mason said, shaking his head. I'm not part of this. She smiled. You always were. Suddenly, the floor beneath Mason's feet vanished. He fell. He fell, and darkness swallowed him whole. He landed hard on cold stone, coughing as dust billowed around him. He scrambled to his feet, blinking rapidly. He stood in an underground chamber, circular, endless in every direction. Thousands of candles flickered in alcoves along the walls, each one casting just enough light to illuminate the skeletal faces surrounding him. Faces pressed into the walls, mummified bodies had been merged into the stone, open mouths frozen mid-scream, eye sockets hollow and deep. As he turned, the chamber shifted, the walls moving, breathing, as if the hill itself had a circulatory system and he'd fallen into its heart. Footsteps echoed behind him. He spun. Ivy stood in the doorway of a narrow tunnel, but not Ivy. Her skin was paper white, veins pulsing black beneath the surface. Her eyes bled ink, and her jaw cracked sideways when she smiled. Come see what you've become, she said. Mason ran, bolting through one of the tunnels. Ivy's twisted laughter followed, bouncing off the stone in all directions. He sprinted until his legs screamed, ducking through narrowing passages, crawling over bones, squeezing between walls so tight they scraped his skin raw. He emerged into a new chamber, a dome of jagged roots, and in the center, a mirror. It stood unnaturally pristine, polished silver surrounded by a frame of bone and moss. Mason approached cautiously. He didn't see his reflection. He saw her, Lara, her mouth sewn shut like the girl's, her eyes wide, filled with pleading and terror. She pounded on the glass, screaming without sound. Behind her, Deshawn floated in a black void, limp, swaying like a marionette. Ivy stood in the background, hand on her face, whispering something that caused Laura to convulse. Mason reached toward the mirror. A hand shot out, not his. It grabbed his wrist. Mason screamed and yanked backward, but the reflection was gripping tight, dragging him toward the glass. Cold surged through his body. His vision blurred. He could feel his own thoughts slipping. No, no, you're not taking me. With a desperate lunge, Mason slammed his free hand into the base of the mirror, cracking the frame. The glass shattered with a shriek. The hand vanished. Silence fell again. But it wasn't peace. It was anticipation. The broken mirror reformed instantly, now reflecting Mason again. Only now his reflection smiled while he didn't. The reflection raised its hand and traced words on the inside of the glass. She's waiting. Mason turned. A long hallway stretched before him, lined with flickering lanterns. He followed it, each step feeling heavier than the last. His mind fogged, memories slipping through his grasp like mist. He could barely remember what his own voice sounded like. Was he even real anymore? The hallway ended at a wooden door, intricately carved with scenes of suffering. A child offered to a black pit, a man nailed to a tree, a family drowned in blood. A phrase was carved above the door in jagged Latin, in tenebris veritas, in darkness the truth. He opened the door and stepped into his childhood bedroom. Perfect, untouched, posters on the wall, bed unmade, toys scattered on the floor, the hum of a box fan in the corner. Mason blinked rapidly. What? He took a step in. The air was warm, safe, the scent of fresh laundry. His mother's voice echoed faintly from downstairs. It felt like home, but when he turned around, the door was gone. He was trapped. Suddenly, the objects in the room began to melt. Posters dripped into the floor like paint. Toys bled. The fan sparked, sputtered, then groaned like a dying animal. The floorboards blackened and bubbled, oozing dark ichor that rose past his ankles. From under the bed, fingers curled around the edge. Long, thin, twitching. Then a face, his own, but mutilated, lips sewn shut, eyes bleeding, skin stitched in patches. It crawled out, dragging itself toward him. Mason stumbled back, slipping in the ooze. The thing pointed at him. You were always meant to be the fourth, it hissed. I never, Mason gasped, voice trembling. I never wanted this. I didn't know. The thing grinned. Doesn't matter. The hill knows you. The dead man knows you. Suddenly, Mason was yanked downward, not by hands, but by gravity itself. The room collapsed around him like a folding house of cards, vanishing into darkness. He landed on cold stone again, this time in a place he hadn't seen before, the heart of the hill, a vast underground cathedral made of bone and root. At the center stood the red stone altar, larger now, pulsing. The eyeless girl waited beside it. So did Ivy, Deshawn, and Laura, all smiling, all silent. The girl raised a skeletal hand and pointed at the altar. The fourth stone sat there. It now bore a name, Mason. Mason's knees buckled as he stared at the altar, the red stone etched with his name. He didn't want to believe it. But there it was, engraved in deep grooves, as if carved with fingernails. Mason, I didn't write that, he muttered, stepping back. I never touched it. Behind him the whispers began again, first soft, like wind curling through dry leaves, then louder, deeper. A chorus of voices blending together. The lost, the damned, the transformed. He walks in shadow. He dines on memory. He trades names for silence. The eyeless girl stepped forward, arms raised like a priestess at a funeral. Her robes had merged with her flesh, skin fused into the fabric, twitching and pulsing like it was alive. Ivy, Laura, and Deshawn stood behind her in stiff unison, their mouths moving in time with the chant, though no sound left their lips. Mason stumbled backward into a column of bone. His hands brushed skulls embedded into the structure, some animal, some human, some unidentifiable. The bones hummed. What do you want from me? He demanded. The eyeless girl's stitched mouth tore open with a wet snap. Her voice was wind and rot. Your fear, Mason. Your fear feeds the hill. The cathedral trembled. Roots exploded from the ground around the altar, coiling like serpents. The walls bled sap so dark it looked black.
thick and oozing, like crude oil. Mason turned to run, but where once was a tunnel, now stood a wall of flesh, rippling like something just behind it was trying to break through. He was trapped again. A voice hissed near his ear, though no one stood behind him. "You shouldn't have returned. I didn't choose this," he shouted. The room roared in response. A chorus of howls and laughter, voices young and old, male and female, human and not. The altar split open down the center, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling downward into pitch black. The girl pointed. "You descend, or we will." Mason didn't move. The moment stretched, then snapped. Ivy rushed forward with inhuman speed, her hands clawing at his chest, eyes leaking black tears. She screamed soundlessly as she dragged him to the stair. Lara and Deshawn followed, their feet never touching the floor, hovering as if on invisible strings. Mason fought, kicked, screamed, but no one outside the hill would ever hear him. Down he went. The staircase spiraled for what felt like miles, each step slick with something wet. The walls pulsed with unseen arteries, and every few feet he passed symbols carved into the stone, symbols that seemed to burn into his memory. They were in a language he couldn't read, yet somehow understood. Offer, obey, forget, become. At last, the stairwell opened into a chamber colder than ice, a place that rejected light, warmth, and life itself. This was the true core of Dead Man's Hill. The chamber was vast, the ceiling lost to darkness. The only illumination came from a massive tree in the center, dead, black, and leafless. Its roots were embedded into corpses, hundreds, maybe thousands, all partially merged with the floor. The tree was fed not by soil but by the dead. And then Mason saw him, the dead man. He stood beneath the tree, tall, gaunt, dressed in funeral robes that billowed without wind. His face was a mass of shadow, shifting and undefined, but his eyes burned red, like coals smothered in ash. He raised one long-fingered hand. "You are the fourth," the dead man said, his voice booming through the chamber like thunder in grave dirt. "The heart must beat anew. The wheel must turn again." "I won't do it," Mason spat, though his knees quivered. "You already have." With a flick of his hand, the floor before Mason shifted, revealing a pit filled with mirrors. In each mirror, Mason saw himself, each reflection different. One version screamed as his body was dragged into the altar. Another stood obediently beside the girl. A third hacked at his own face with a rock. A fourth floated in black water, unmoving. A fifth burned, laughing all the while. Thousands of versions, all ending. "This is not a place of choices," the dead man said. "This is a place of conclusion. You entered the hill, you spoke the name. The story began. Now it must be finished. I didn't ask for this." The dead man's head tilted, slowly. "No one does. But you listened." Suddenly the roots of the tree lifted. From beneath them, a figure crawled out. Not Ivy, not Lara, not Deshawn. It was Mason, another version, half-burned, mouth sewn shut, hands bound in thorny vines. His eyes, however, were full of recognition, pleading. They locked gazes. Mason felt the fear surge. This wasn't a hallucination. This was a version of himself that had failed, a fragment that had tried to escape and become part of the tree. The dead man raised both hands. The roots descended again and crushed the second Mason, pulling him back into the soil like fertilizer. The room echoed with a deep sigh of contentment, of the hill's hunger momentarily sated. "You cannot run," the dead man said. "You cannot fight, but you can remember." Mason collapsed, overwhelmed. Visions flooded his mind. Not memories but other lives. He saw a woman with red hair screaming into an empty forest. A man hanging from a tree, his shadow stretching for miles. Children crawling out of graves, laughing with no mouths. A church consumed by flames, while a congregation sang without tongues. All lives, all devoured by the hill. Each one thought they were the first. The dead man whispered, kneeling beside him. Each one thought they could leave. But the hill keeps what it takes, and it never forgets. Mason sobbed, shaking, broken. The dead man reached toward him. "Join us." But Mason, barely able to think, barely able to breathe, whispered one word. "No." The air froze. Silence fell. Then a scream tore through the chamber, high-pitched, bone rattling, not Mason's. The hills, the trees shuddered, the corpses writhed, the ground cracked. Mason stood, eyes wide. He had done something wrong. He had refused, and the hill didn't like that. The dead man recoiled, his shadow face twisting in rage. You deny us. The earth quaked. The sky above cracked open, revealing a sky made of swirling black mist. From the altar above, a sound echoed down, the sound of a heartbeat. Louder and louder. Mason turned to run. This time the tunnels opened for him, and from behind he heard the voices of Ivy, Lara, Deshawn, screaming, "Don't leave us."
Mason ran. The roots of the hill screamed around him, shrill, fractured howls that echoed through tunnels that twisted and shifted with every step he took. The once rigid bones and stone that made up the hill's interior were now flesh and nerve, writhing, reshaping, hunting. As he sprinted through the dark corridor, walls pressed closer. Faces bulged from them, eyeless, lipless, whispering his name. Mason, 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 Mason. The hallway forked suddenly into three paths. No signs, no clues, just three black throats that promised madness on the other side. Behind him, something roared. He didn't choose, he reacted. Instinct hurled him into the leftmost tunnel. The world flickered. For half a second, it wasn't a tunnel at all. It was the street outside his childhood home, bathed in red light, empty swing sets creaking in a wind that didn't exist. Then it flicked back to stone, then forest, then stone again. The hill was trying to break him, to confuse him, to unmake him. And it was working. He could no longer tell what was real. The sound of his footfalls didn't match the sensation beneath him. His breath tasted like metal. His hands were not the same. One looked swollen, fingers fatter, as if someone else's hand had been stitched to his wrist. He blinked. It was gone. He screamed, "Keep running, Mason." The tunnel opened into a chamber lined with broken windows. Hundreds of them, all cracked and hung in the air without walls. Each one reflected something not in the room. A mother rocking a child with no skin. A priest dragging his own entrails across a pulpit. A young girl burying her face into a stuffed bear that wept real blood. Mason stepped through, careful not to look at them too long. But one reflection caught his eye. It was Lara, alone, in the woods, still alive. She was digging something from the ground, a wooden box. She opened it, inside a necklace Mason had given her on her 16th birthday. Her lips moved. She was speaking to him. "I'm sorry, Mason. I didn't know what this place really was. But if you can still hear me, fight it. Just fight it." Mason stepped toward the mirror. The glass shattered. Behind him, a new voice rose, sharp, broken, desperate. "You left us, Mason." Ivy. She burst into the room like a whirlwind, her face now split vertically, half human, half the eyeless girl. Her fingers elongated into claws. Her spine jutted outward in broken spikes. "You think you're better than us?" she snarled. "You think you can escape what we accepted?" "I never asked to be part of this," Mason yelled, backing away. "You were always part of it." She lunged. Mason ducked, diving through a broken window frame into another tunnel, or dimension. He wasn't sure anymore. He rolled and landed in snow, actual snow. His breath formed mist, and he blinked at a pale sky above, pine trees, silence. Dead Man's Hill looked normal. Almost. A crow landed nearby, cocked its head, and spoke. "Yes, it looks peaceful, doesn't it?" Mason didn't move. "You think it's over?" The crow continued. "It's just a new shape. The hill is never one place. It's wherever it wants to be." "Why me?" Mason whispered. "Why not you?" the crow answered. Then it exploded in a burst of black feathers, revealing the dead man behind it, his body now crawling with insects, worms leaking from his chest cavity. Enough running. Mason stumbled back into a familiar clearing, the same one they'd first entered together. Only now, the altar was floating. The stones were missing, except for one, the fourth, still bearing his name. "Every generation," the dead man said, "a group comes,
4 souls. 3 feed the hill. 1 carries the curse forward. The survivor is the usher. Usher, Mason asked, backing away. Usher to what? To invite the next. The trees around him parted. Shapes emerged. Dozens, hundreds, all people who had once entered. Explorers, thrill seekers, lost hikers, all now part of the hill. Each of them smiled. Mason, the dead man said, placing a skeletal hand on his shoulder. You don't have to die here. You just have to accept your place. Carry the story. Spread the fear. Become the next voice. The altar pulsed. The 4th stone cracked, then shattered. A deep groan echoed through the hill. The corpses embedded in the earth began to stir. Roots twisted downward. The tree of bones above collapsed in on itself. The red light that once bathed the underground cathedral began to flicker violently. And somewhere deep below, something ancient awoke. Mason fell to his knees. The dead man stepped forward and touched his forehead. Your friends are already part of me, he said softly. They remember nothing now, just faces in the roots. I don't want to forget, Mason whispered. The dead man leaned in close. Then you will remember everything. Suddenly pain seared through Mason's skull. Not just physical, existential. Visions poured in. Centuries of victims, all devoured by the hill. Men who slit their own throats to stop the whispers. Women who walked into fire, laughing. Children playing with things that didn't cast shadows. Their knowledge filled him. Their terror became his own. And something else slipped inside. A presence. Cold, powerful, timeless. The dead man, a part of him now. The altar glowed brightly. Once more, Mason stood, eyes glowing red. The dead man nodded slowly. Now, you are the story. And then in a blink, Mason stood, alone in the forest. Bright sun, filtered through trees. Birds chirped. He turned. No altar, no blood, no bones. Just the sound of leaves in the wind. But deep beneath the earth, something moved. Waiting, Mason stood, motionless, blinking against the midday sunlight. The weight of the vision still clung to him, like wet grave soil. Every breath he took tasted like ash. The forest was calm now, uncannily normal. Birds chirped. A breeze rustled. The treetops. And somewhere distant, water trickled down a small stream. But he knew better. The hill was still here. It was always here. Beneath the roots, behind the trees, wrapped around reality like a coil. It had merely changed its skin. Mason reached into his pocket. His fingers touched something he didn't remember picking up. A small piece of the shattered altar stone. Warm, pulsing, alive. He dropped it immediately. From behind a tree, a voice called out, Mason. He froze. The voice was familiar, desperate. Human. Mason. Is that really you? Ivy. He turned slowly. She stumbled out from the trees, looking bruised but alive. Her eyes were wide with panic. Her hair matted. Her jacket torn. She ran to him and threw her arms around his shoulders. You're alive. You're okay. Mason didn't speak. He felt her heartbeat. It was real, but she wasn't. He'd seen her die. He'd watched her become something else. Part of the hill? A puppet stitched into the roots. You're not Ivy, he said quietly. She froze in his arms, then smiled. No, she whispered. But you knew that. Her face peeled back in strips like melting paper, revealing not horror but another face beneath. His own. The imitation collapsed into ash. The hill was testing him again, trying to see if he would bend. Mason turned and ran, his boots slamming against the dirt path. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to leave the woods, had to leave the hill. But the forest began to repeat itself. A tree with a gash in the bark reappeared again and again. He passed a moss-covered boulder 3 times. The stream kept circling him, always to the left. He was running in a loop. Trapped. No, he hissed through clenched teeth. You don't get to keep me. From somewhere above, the sky cracked like porcelain. The sun dimmed. A low-frequency hum began, deep like something gigantic grinding its way into this world. He collapsed to his knees. I said no. The ground opened beneath him. He didn't fall. He descended, slowly, like being drawn in by invisible hooks, dragged by the force of the hill itself, down into the soil, through layers of memory and bone. He passed faces, dozens of them, staring out from the walls, all whispering, "Let go, be the story, tell them." He landed in darkness, not the same as before. This was different. This was outside the hill, beyond it, a space that had no time, no gravity, no sound. Floating before him, the altar, reassembled, glowing. Behind it stood the dead man, but now fully formed, not a shadow, a being, tall, thin, with white skin stretched over too many joints. His eyes burned like suns behind fog. His mouth was wide and filled with teeth that clicked as he spoke. "You tried to deny the role," he said, "but denial is not escape." "What are you?" Mason rasped. "Why us?" The dead man cocked his head. "I am memory," he said. "I am the wound beneath the world's skin. I am the fear that cannot die, the pain that must be passed. You gave it shape." "No," Mason said. "I inherited it. That's different." A faint smirk formed on the dead man's face. "You understand more than most." The altar pulsed. "Your friends were chosen. You were claimed. Every cycle ends in one. A living witness. A carrier. A curse bearer. You will walk the world, and through you we will feed." Mason clenched his fists. "I'm not your vessel." "You already are," the dead man whispered. Mason screamed and ran. Again. But this time, he didn't run away. He ran toward the altar. The dead man blinked, taken aback. Mason leapt onto the altar and drove his fists into it. Over and over, the stone cracked. Blood spurted from the wounds on his hands. The altar drank it. The dead man screamed. The space began to collapse. Reality folded inward like wet paper. Faces peeled from the walls. The hill roared, and Mason, consumed in white light, remembered everything. He awoke, in his bed, at home. The sun poured through the window. Birds chirped outside. Was it real? Had it all been a nightmare? He sat up slowly. His palms still bled. On his nightstand, the altar fragment. And beside it, a note, handwritten, in his own handwriting. "They're coming. You must warn them. The hill is hungry. It never ends." He looked in the mirror. For a moment, just a flicker, his reflection smiled when he didn't. And his eyes, they were glowing red. Let me know in the comments, what was the most disturbing part for you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this nightmare with others. And remember, Dead Man's Hill is always watching, always waiting.